Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.
Hello everyone, welcome to Road to Cheltenham. Now this is a look back on the DRF and also what's happened over the last 7 days, including all the action from Britain. And Ruby, it's a chance for you to have taken a breath, had a proper look. I mean, we were shooting from the hip a bit with Jane on Monday evening. Has anything changed from your on the day, on the hoof reaction to having gone back and had a look over it?
Not too much. I often think your first impression is usually the one you stick with, but probably Marine National. I hadn't copped them getting quite tight to the first fence on the outside. It was actually David Russell said it to me the following day, and I think he probably could be given a bit more credit for where he finished and how he ran, if you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
no, I think other than that, first impressions last.
There are a couple of things that I've kind of refined my view on and sort of maybe balanced up and brought some more questions on one or two as well, where I can see the flip side angle. So we'll come across those as we go along through it. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's best if, Ruby, from your perspective, because you understand the course really well. We were dealing with different conditions to those which we would traditionally being expected. We're also dealing with a different order of running because we had Sunday's card being run before Saturday's card, and there was movement. I mean, the team at Leopardstown did a phenomenal job, and we all saw the water they had to get off the track, all the moving parts that they had to deal with. The second day hurdles track was unraceable on the first day. I mean, it's an amazing job, but just so that when everybody's sort of calmly reflecting on it, they understand what the layout was like and who that might advantage and disadvantage. Can you just take us through the 2 days and what it looked like from a track perspective?
Yeah, obviously on Sunday they raced on the ground they would normally use in March, which is right out by the fences. And look, I think if you look back, Honesty Policy won his maiden hurdle out on that line last year at that March meeting. So that's the ground they moved to out beside the Chase track, which is a bit drier because there's not water in the summer. Then obviously you move to the middle.
Sorry to interrupt, Ruby. So they were saying that it was a brand new hurdles line. So that actually wasn't the case.
I don't know, it didn't look into my eye anyway. I definitely thought I'd been on it before.
Okay.
But it was, I think it's a track that's been used before. I'd say Arkle would probably be the best one to comment on that. But no, and then you obviously move to the middle. But I think, Lydia, Leopardstown is only 2 tracks. When you're right on the inside, which you can be for the beginning of the flat season, and the jumpers will be on the 3rd, maybe the 4th day of the Christmas meetings. It is a different race course. But once you come out 10 yards, I think the middle and the outside pretty much ride the same. So, and we were never going to be on the inside. So to me, I don't think it played too much of a part in the action at the weekend. But the rain definitely took the bias out of the chase course. There was no bias to the outside over fences. And I think getting rain and it being a proper jumping surface, it leveled the whole track.
And we had one fence admitted on the first day, and we had a hurdle admitted in 2 of the races on the second day due to low sun, something else.
Yeah, the second last. And obviously, if you're used to watching Leopardstown, the low sun can often be the last hurdle at Christmas time. Early races at midday, but by the time the champion hurdle was run in the late afternoon, it had gone around to where the second last hurdle is. But yeah, not ideal, because you'd like, Leopardstown does have a long run over hurdles and over fences. The last 4 or 5 furlongs, there's not a whole pile of jumping. You would love to have a jump in there. But I do think that lads that are jockeys that are used to riding Leopardstown don't tend to commit till they go through the wings of the second last hurdle or jump the second last hurdle either way.
So when people are hearing your analysis of the DRF races, in your mind, ground-wise, what are you calling the hurdles track and what are you calling the chase track?
I think it was heavy over hurdles on Sunday or Monday even. Keep getting that one wrong, but I don't think the chase course looked that deep or rode that deep. It was soft ground, but it was like Leopardstown's ground wasn't as deep as Gordon's last week. That was deeper ground, and there was water, but the chase course, and you can see it in Majborough's time and the speed he went. Now, obviously, Romeo Coolio and Cargies finished a bit slower, but for the pace Majborough was going, it told you it was only soft at worst.
People have referred to the hurdles track being specialist ground. Do you buy into that? It sounds like you don't, making the comparison with Goran.
No, Goran was deeper, tackier, plenty of
Mhm.
kickback in Leopardstown, lots of goggles, plenty of muck coming back. I think loose ground is a lot easier for horses to cope with. But that said, if you were a good ground horse, it's not going to suit you. But if you're a good ground horse, it's the middle of winter, your time, probably not.
And in terms of you're getting your Saturdays, Sundays and Mondays mixed up, I mean, honestly, I am heavy odds on to be doing that several times during the course of this programme. So I hope everybody at home can forgive us. Right, so that's what's coming ahead. We're also going to be joined by Josh Stacey, who's got some news and views later on. But in a moment, we're going to get on with things and start with the established tracers. There's only one place to start if we're going to talk about the established chasers, and that is obviously a belting edition of the Paddy Power Irish Gold Cup. Now, this is one that I did go back over, Ruby, and have another look at. I was impressed on the day with Factor File. I was so much more impressed watching it back closely. But take us through the race from your perspective.
Yeah, we'll get to the rest in a second, but I was even looking at the times and the sectional times this morning, and the middle of the race, Lydia, is from the time they go through just beyond halfway. They just kept upping the ante like good horses do. So I agree with you. I was impressed on the day, but when I watched it back, I thought it was a cracking contest. They went hard early, galloping a Sean Baffadale Fury, booked out with Monty's pass. Really strong gallop early. Spindlebury was a little bit keen. Factor File changed tack after jumping 2 fences. Mark went back into the middle of the track on him, and Gaelic Warrior, having set off last, pinged his way down the back and ended up wide and very keen by the time they got around to the home straight with Patrick Mullins. And he really gave himself no chance the way he was racing through it. He got caught on the outside and never got any cover. I know the way of thinking was quite high at the last fence on the first circuit, but he was definitely, I thought, going better than he had been going at any stage of Christmas. Gaelic Warrior kept pulling Affadale Fury up the ante. Spindlebury was beaten when it got back to where they started. By the time they got to the ditch in the back straight, Grange Clare West was struggling and horses were falling out the back. Lecky Watson as well. Affadale Fury stopped quite quickly after the fourth last, and Factor File just kept pouring it on. Down to the second last, brilliant jump. I wondered off the bend whether he'd keep going, and when Mark opened him up going to the last, I was still wondering, is he going to get up the way to the line? But he did. I was impressed with Gaelic Warrior considering how keen he was. I thought Gallopin ran a decent race. He kept going. I think Firefox paid Iroko a compliment from the Rascot run, the way he came home, but he was ridden to do that. Monty Star faded, but there was, look, you were hoping with a field of that depth to get a really good race, and that's what you got. Now, I think a lot of the crowd wanted Gallopin to jump to win, but
Of course.
that's just not the way it works.
Yeah, of course. That's really understandable. He was looking to become the first horse to win 4 Irish Gold Cups on the bounce, and it wasn't to be. But let's go through the main players individually, and then we can do the rest in chunks. Factor File, the thing that I thought that was most impressive was just how easily he did everything, and his jumping was there. And I do think that kind of ground, it not being too quick for him, I think that is a factor to him showing his absolute best. But you and Jane were telling me that he'd been in the Gold Cup initially, that David Casey had put him in the race, and then JP McManus and Frank Berry are of the view that he had to come out. So that conversation is going to be reopened, and I think, having looked back at that race, I really do think it should be reopened. I think I mean, I know that Clissetton have always thought he's a Gold Cup horse, and this is the first time that I have totally believed that.
Yeah, me too. And when the Gold Cup entries were being made, I don't think I saw Factor File as a Gold Cup horse. I can see exactly why they thought, you know what, what's the point in putting him in there? He looks a Ryanair horse, and that's what he did. And I also think when you look at it, an operation of that size, if you can save one entry for every horse, it amounts to a lot of money. So I can understand why they want horses put in races where they think they'll run. Does he have to get supplemented now? There's a strong case for it. There's a hugely strong case for it. I know I would, but he's not my horse.
Yeah, I was pondering it on Monday, and I wasn't 100% sure. Since I've looked back at it, I think that is what they should do. We mentioned it worked last year in similar circumstances for I Know the Way You're Thinking. We'll get on to him in a moment. Splanstour's been given that entry in the Grand National, and I wonder whether that's where they're pivoting with him. So I think there is a spot there for their number one representative, and he obviously would be the number one representative for the Gold Cup.
You would
And
think he is now, anyway.
And how about Gaelic Warrior? You mentioned how keen he was. In his post-race interview, Willie Mullins was talking about there could be the option of dropping back in trip for the Ryanair, but he also expressed some confidence of him staying the Gold Cup trip. He sort of he ended up just sort of like he was kind of being taken back and being interrupted. I understand why that was, because he was just too keen, and Patrick Mullins would have been thinking about getting him home. But what's your view about what would see him to best effect?
It's a tricky one, because when you do make the run-in with him, he does run away. He's not a horse that goes to the front and settles. Like, he ran away in the John Durkin. He ran away when Factifile beat him in the Novice Chase here. So when he is in front, and when he's in front, he does jump markedly to his left, isn't it? Right.
No, it's his right.
Right. He's right, yeah. He goes mad to his right. So there is that to be factored into how you ride him. So I think if you ride them in a Gold Cup, you're probably going down the inside half, 2/3 of the way back to make sure you have enough of cover. Whereas in a Ryanair, you can probably ride him third down the inside, because they'll be just going that mile an hour quicker. And after going 5 furlongs, if you happen to run away, he probably could do an undersaw.
Yeah, he could do. He could do. And if we think he does go Gold Cupwards, lots of people are sort of seeing Galopin Des Champs' run as the fading of the light. And I'm mentioning Gaelic Warrior because of Paul Tannen potentially having a choice. But let's deal with whether you agree the interpretation that many people think, changing of the guard, fading of the light, however you put it, about Galopin Des Champs at the age he is, 10, not being the force of what he was previously.
I don't think he is the force of what he was. But I wouldn't be, if I had backed him, I suppose you have a skinnier price than you have now, so you're probably not overly impressed either. But I could see him back at Cheltenham. I do think it was tough having his first run in the Savills and having the race he had. He was always going to improve in that period of time was going to be difficult enough, to the effects of the first run on him, and then try and build him up for the second run. Whereas I think with the races in the tank now and the fitness there, Willie can probably back off him and freshen him up to Cheltenham. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was better on Gold Cup Day than he was last Monday. But I still think you need to be a little bit romantic to think he's going to win.
That's my instinct too, that he's going to be better at Cheltenham than he would have been that we've just seen him. It was interesting to hear Willie Mullins say 2 or 3 times that, similar to you, that basically he was worried that he would get tired after having such a big race in a Grade 1 as his first start of the season. He was half expecting what he saw in the Irish Gold Cup, but he thought that he saw enough. Now, I know you don't like the cheap pieces argument I've been making, and I should stress, I'm not making it from genuine terms in any kind of way. I think he's a very genuine horse, but I do think he's, particularly last season and also in the Irish Gold Cup, a tendency to sort of jump a bit upright rather than go through. Would something like that help him?
I'd say you could be into a cycle of cheek pieces in Close Sutton. They come and go in Willie Mullins' land. And cheek pieces worked at the weekend for Majborough. So they'll probably be applied to a lot of horses in the next couple of weeks until they stop working, and then they'll be binned, and a visor or a blinker would appear again in 6 months' time. But I'd say just with the current trend of the success with cheek pieces, I wouldn't rule it out.
Okay. And I think that could give him a bit extra pep, but let's see. People are saying the proximity of Firefox brings down what Galopin Des Champs did. I mean, Firefox was ridden to pick up the pieces, wasn't he? And Galopin Des Champs was involved at every stage.
Oh yeah, and so was Gaelic Warrior, and so was Factifile. They were in one race, Factifile was in another, but I enjoy watching people ride big price horses to rob what they can. And I think there's an art to that too. And I thought Sean Bowen did a great job on Monday.
And it might be first time tongue tie and the distance actually helped Firefox. It might be that he's improved a little bit anyway.
Yeah, it possibly has. And as I said when we were doing it, does it play a Rocco a compliment? Maybe it does. But yeah, I just think you can get riding horses that way can give you a false reading as to how the horses actually ran. And but look, that's part of racing, isn't it?
Let's talk about a couple of the disappointments or horses that ended up with what happened being far from ideal. Affordale Fury, who was a revelation really in the Savills Chase, and he was to the fore for much of the race in the Irish Gold Cup, but he ended up dropping through the field like a stone, and he finished lame in the end, didn't he, Ruby?
He did. He stopped very quickly from looking like he was in the mix going to the fourth last. He was completely out of the race 3/4 of a furlong later by the time they got to the third last fence. So obviously there was a post-race report to say he was lame afterwards, but it did look like something had happened to him. But it was probably going to be difficult enough for him to win again after a career best at Christmas. But you kind of thought he'd get in the mix all the same.
Yeah, and I suppose he's had a catalogue of issues. This time they've had a relatively free run, so I'm glad that his ability has got them a grade 1 over Christmas. You were saying that he was a bit sweaty in the paddock as well, and it was a cold day. The other one, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, it was. He was sweating between his hind legs, but it was great training to get him to win a grade 1.
And then I know the way you're thinking, you were mentioning that you liked the look of him in the paddock. And this was one that that he was looking a lot better than he had done recently in the paddock. This was one that it was only when I went back to the race that I saw how much of an issue the jumping was. He was going markedly right all the time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I did think, I don't know, probably shouldn't have watched so many horses at one time, but I did think there was more life than there had been at Christmas. I thought Mark Walsh's body language very early at Christmas was squeezing and slapping along, whereas I thought Keith looked like he was travelling much easier. I thought he looked better in the parade ring. There was no doubt about that, and there was a bit of life in him in the paddock as well. But I thought even when they crossed the road for a couple of strides, when you knew the pace on the front end was as strong as it was, and you were looking back in the field, he caught my eye once or twice thinking he could latch on and close here. And I Maximus caught my eye in the same way, but actually it was Firefox that latched on and came home. I thought I wouldn't have been surprised when they crossed the road with 7 to run if that had been another way of thinking coming home the way Firefox did. But ultimately he didn't. And I thought he was going well enough crossing the road, which is just over 7 furlongs from home. I thought he was close enough and going all right with his undoubted stamina to come home, but he didn't. And that raises a big question mark.
It does, and obviously he took that heavy fall at the last. Unfortunately, he is fine afterwards. I just thought his jumping wasn't good enough. I thought he was clambering over fences as if he didn't want to jump them, or he's feeling something, or I don't know what it was, but he just looked really uncomfortable to me. Now, lots of those horses that ran in the Irish Gold Cup have potentially got the Grand National as the target, and the entries for that race came out earlier this week. Iroko is the anti-post favourite for that, and Clisette and Willie Mullins have entered 15, including the winners of the last 2 editions, Nick Rocket and I Am Maximus. I've mentioned that Spillane's Tower, it's in there, so is Hey2 Couleur. Were there any, Ruby, in the Irish Gold Cup that caught your eye with the Grand National in mind?
I thought Maximus ran just fine. Was probably a little bit far back, according to Jack, to get involved. I thought Sham Kiley showed up well for a long way, as too did Monty's Pass. And I think that they're just not quite grade 1 horses, but I think any of them can be really competitive in a Gold Cup, or in the Grand National even, sorry.
There's going to be more information in this division on Saturday with the Dublin Chase at Newbury. I'm going to drop down in trip now and give a mention to JPR1, who was a star at Musselburgh, really controlled the race, looked a different gear to the rest of the horses. Afterwards, Joe Tizard, his trainer, was talking about potentially going for a Ryanair. He says he just can't win a champion chase. So it's good to see that horse in such good heart. But let's drop down further in trip to the Dublin Chase, Ruby, and have a reflection of Majborough and your take on how that race developed.
Yeah, it was interesting. Look, we'll go from the start. Solis was never going in the first time visor, but watch what he does to Marine National at the first. He jumps across in front of him and had Marine National pegged out to the outside wing, and that put Marine National on the back foot very early. He was struggling down to the second fence then when Majborough, Solis and Energamine were bowling along in front, and they just kept attacking on the front end, and I think got Solis out of his comfort, or got Marine National on the back foot. Mark cut the bend away from the stands and flew the third fence, and from there on he had everybody in trouble. Now Majborough jumped, if anything, a fraction to his right, which we'd never seen him do before, but he attacked every jump. He never backed off. There was never a half stride. Even at the third last, he was just spot on and pinged it. Second last, he let fly rather than taking the half a stride and clouting it like he had been doing in the past. And even off the home turn, Marine National has probably done well to get on his tail. But Majborough's fastest section was the second last furlong. His fastest speed was achieved on the run to the last fence. And this was a horse who'd made all the running. Even from the last home, he quickened really well. He had a finishing speed percentage was just under 100. But I thought all the way he looked in complete control. And whilst I wouldn't have dreamt of putting cheap pieces on him, by God, did it work.
Yes, and Willie Mullins was keen to give the credit to Mark Walsh for that. And Mark felt that that's how he would be helped to ride him in the way that he really wanted to ride him. And I know that you're going to have a look in Majborough in more detail. Let's have a look very briefly at the horses that he beat. So Marine National, then, lots of people making the argument that return to Cheltenham, where he's got such a good record, where the ground won't be as testing, we think, as it was at the DRF, even though we're not talking heavy, we're definitely talking soft. What's your take?
Yeah, and I just think that the early exchanges too, like they were going hard early, and he got put on the back foot at the first fence, and then you're always playing catch up, and it's hard to catch up in a race like that. He showed the honesty that he always shows, that he never gives up Marine National,
Yes.
and he keeps plugging away. But I know Barry doesn't think that there's a huge advantage to a sounder surface for him, but he always maintained there was a novice hurdler, and I think there still is.
Yeah, I agree with you about the heart. I mean, getting back up past Founder 50, I think, tells you all you need to know. And Ergerman's been taken out of the champion chase. Could he be a player in the Ryanair, or does he need to set his sights lower?
I think he needs probably to set his sights a little bit lower now, and possibly without real soft ground. He might have even been in Leopardstown last weekend. His sights could have been lowered, but with the chance of it being really heavy, and it wasn't. I think Energamine was there in case you did need a canoe to get around the place, and he didn't on the chase track, and so it didn't play to his strengths.
And the visor, maybe Solness didn't like that very much. I just think he couldn't dominate. He could not dominate with Majborough in the field.
No, and that's what's happened to him a couple of times in the UK as well. But the visor, I was still surprised to see JJ giving him a reminder as early as he did. He did look like he was in a bit of a strop.
Yeah, he did. I think that's fair. Right, okay. We've touched on it, but now we can go at it full throttle. Ruby is going to analyse this, and his subject is Majborough's jumping.
Right, so for this week's Analyse This, we were going to look at Majborough and the story of Majborough's life as a chaser. Of course, it began in Fairyhouse, where he jumped the first couple of fences really well, a bit sticky at the second, but at the sixth fence, he made quite an awkward mistake, chipped in half a stride and looked clumsy, but he pinged the seventh. He then went to Leopardstown, where he made the running again. Brilliant over the first four. Fifth fence, he looked awkward again at the sixth fence, and you're kind of wondering to yourself, can this fella really shorten? Went to Cheltenham, bucked out down over the first couple, shortened at the second, and was brilliant over the first 9 until he got to the last ditch, where he dropped his hind end in it, pinged the 11th, because that was the 10th fence, but then the 11th and 12th in the Arkle, second last, gallops on instead of letting fly, and does the same again at the last fence. And there's question marks about him. So he goes from Cheltenham to Punchestown, pings the first 3, and actually showed us for the first time that he could shorten at the 4th fence. Now, it was also the first time we saw him going dramatically to his left at Punchestown. Went to Cork, ran around going to the first fence, making the running. ran around at the second, made a mistake at the seventh, and ultimately it was the second last that cost him this race when he galloped on instead of letting fly. Leopardstown at Christmas, fifth fence, bit clumsy, but it was definitely a way better round the jumping than he had put in a Cork. And then last weekend, cheek pieces on, down to the first, and he comes a half a stride early. Second last fence, again, he lets fly rather than taking that half a stride that has been catching him out. And that was the focus of the cheek pieces. He was much more forward, and he was either spot on or long. There was no short, and he just attacked.
So when we discussed Majborough early in this series, and I was wondering about more positive tactics, and you wanted to go up and trip, and you just said earlier in this show that cheek pieces wouldn't have been what you reached for. What were you sort of juggling in your mind? Sort of why was it not something you would have thought about?
Because I just always thought once you had the bit in his mouth, he would take you. So I didn't think, I actually thought he'd run away with cheek pieces, but I never thought of just letting him off and run away, which he didn't run away. Mark just let him off because he had made the running several times. He made it in the Irish Arkle last year. He made it on debut at Ferryhouse. It wasn't so much making the running, it was making the running but keeping him focused. And
Yeah.
the cheek pieces kept him focused. He just kept attacking these fences. So I was thinking if you go up a little bit and trip, he'd better sit up sides in front. He'll stay all day and he'd be able to keep him focused. That's what I was thinking. But Mark Walsh had a better thought.
So you were expecting an attacking ride, presumably, in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. And you mentioned on Monday night that he's going to have to get the first four fences of that right. And he got 3 of the first 4 fences spot on in the Arkle.
I would say he got the 4 right, because you're not going to meet the 4 of them on a long stride. And the second fence was the one he had to get tight to, and he was really good at it in the Arkle.
Okay.
So I don't think that Cheltenham is ultimately going to be the unfolding of him. I just think it's even keeping him concentrated. And even off the home turn in Cheltenham last year to the second last, he wanders slightly off the bend, like he's half looking, and then doesn't attack the second last fence. So I think that's where the cheek pieces have really helped him.
Okay, interesting. Right, we're going to get some more information for potentially various different races from the Game Spirits at Newbury this Saturday, but let's move on to the novice chasing division already, shall we? The Ladbrokes novice chase saw the downing of Final Demand, and again, cheek pieces working the oracle for Mark Walsh. Again, Willie Mullins gave him the credit afterward for saying that they would help Kate Dorothy, and they very much did.
Yeah, and he wore them over hurdles on his last start at Punchestown, but they did help him, and he booked out here. Now, from the word go, Final Demand jumped the first, fine, but early. Second fence, he was good out, jumped Kay Doughty. Third fence, he put down on Paul Townend. That was the first time I saw him doing that. And again, away from the stands at the fifth fence, Paul went for a stride, and Final Demand said no thanks, whereas Kay Doughty was matching him. Then, halfway down the back, he made a mistake and went to the fourth last fence and screws behind, which we hadn't seen him do either. And at the last ditch, it was Kay Doughty that attacked it and Final Demand that backed off. Second last, Kay Doughty out jumped him again and got away from the fence quicker. And then Kay Doughty does what Kay Doughty does. He idled away in front and never pulled miles away from the opposition. I do think the runner-up was on a blinding race, Western Fold, after a layoff, and he would want a sounder surface. But Final Demand, Lydia, he didn't blow me away at Christmas, but I didn't see this run coming either. I expected his jumping to be better, and I thought we'd see a better horse at Leopardstown than we saw. And I'm not going to rule him out and say that's just as good as he is. I think he's a better horse than what we saw.
Yeah, this is one of the horses who, watching back, I refined my view. I've given more credit now to the feeling that Paul Townend had that there was something wrong. I just saw him screw at the one fence, but actually he's awkward at more than one, isn't he? And so I think that it could be that. The flip side to that is that the moment that Kay Dorothy really starts pouring it on next to him is when he immediately backs out. But so you can potentially take two interpretations of that. We'll go back into Final Demand again in a moment, but it's best to focus on the winner first and how he has improved.
Absolutely.
The reapplication of the cheek pieces and a switch to fences. I mean, he had no respect for hurdles, did he? That's really helped him.
No, he didn't, and we'll just pick them out here actually because we have a few of his runs. He's at Punchestown, and these are actually his better 2 jumps of hurdles at Punchestown. And you look back at that race in particular, it's easy to find a lot of mistakes. But when I watched him in Punchestown, I remember thinking, I'd hate to be writing him up for fences. But look, he has gone. He went chasing. Brian Hayes rode him on his chasing debut at Punchestown. Ditch at the bottom of the hill. He barely gets off the ground. But he was good other than that. Gave Kitzbühel a race. Went to Ferryhouse. Second last fence. His hind end land before his front legs land. Now that's a rare one in a chase. Whereas at Leopardstown with the cheek pieces back on, he was much better. Out jumped Final Demand and attacked the third last fence, which is something you expect Final Demand to do. He was good at the second last and he stayed all day. Now he has definitely improved from Punchestown to Ferryhouse to Leopardstown. He's going in the right direction. And the cheek pieces helped him, and he'd stay a lot further than the trip was at the weekend.
Yeah, agreed. And I think left-handed possibly helps him as well. I mean, I know he's won at Punchestown, but I do wonder if he does have a tendency to go that way. And I think with that extra focus as well, that might help him. I suppose I do agree. I think Western Fold coming off a break on ground that probably isn't he's not at his very best on, has run a big race. Equally, he was kind of ridden to pick up the pieces. You've said that Cade Dorothy was idling, which he definitely was, and Final Demand wasn't himself. I think we can all agree on that. So there's a potential that he might be a little bit flattered as well, albeit that you can also make the argument the other way around.
You can, yeah, fractionally, but like I don't think Cade Doughty ran a whole lot differently to how he ran at Limerick. When you look back, Predators Gold and Western Walk, it's Cade Doughty and Western Fold here. Like he's just behind way better horses than were just behind him at Limerick.
This is Final Demand at Limerick, yeah. And what was your take on that race at the time? I know at the time you just said, why are those horses so close?
Yeah, I couldn't believe watching it live that I thought the horses that were on his tail down the hill would actually be a mile behind him. But when you look to Final Demand, what probably disappointed you most on Sunday was his jumping. You watch him here at Navan with Wingman at the ditch first time round, and how he pulls away from Wingman on the landing side of the fence. Same at Limerick, first fence in the back straight with Patrick. When he lands, he opens the gap. Whereas at Leopardstown, couldn't even match Cade Doughty, let alone pull away from him. So like that was one major ace in his pack that wasn't there on what day did he run, Lydia? Monday, was it?
Yeah,
or Sunday?
I can't
That was
remember.
one ace that wasn't in his pack. And but I probably expected more of him. He definitely showed more at Navan than he did at Limerick, and he showed even less on Sunday.
Now, what's your take on the closing stages of the Turners? I said on a Monday night show that I just didn't know how much fight there was in him. And I think you can look at that in two ways. You can say, I think that he was outspeeded by a couple of quicker horses, arguably, although how quick is the runner-up? Or you can say, well, he hit the front entering the straight and he was beaten before they got to the final hurdle. And he was travelling pretty well when he entered the straight.
He was, yeah. He was travelling well 2 out, and he sprints off the bend to go and win the race. And then he does fall going to the last hurdle because he's not going to win by the time he gets to the last. The yellow clays come back and the new line is coming down his outside. So when you look back, you can say it was disappointing. It's very easy to say it was disappointing. And then you're saying, well, what's the yellow clay done since? Well, he had a grueler in the Lismullen and he hasn't gotten over it. And the new line, well, he's favoured for the champion hurdle. So I don't know, you can crab it if you want, or if you look at it and think, I just thought the whole race he needed to be going a mile an hour faster, and that sprint wouldn't have come into it. And ultimately, those that are not going to have been proved right at the moment.
Yeah, I'm keeping an open mind. I can see it.
So
I can still see it both ways. So I'm holding my judgment at the moment with a concern, a bigger concern than I had before going into the DRF about Final Demand and when he faces pressure. We had a top class, a Grade 1 novices chase on Saturday. That was at Sandown. Paul Tanner went over to ride Kitzbühel. Unfortunately, they didn't get very far. Instead, it was Keelan Woods and 6 Mile Bridge who made all, Ruby.
It was 6 Mile Bridge in the Scilly Isles. He wasn't wonderful at the first 6 Mile Bridge, but what you did notice from early was how big the fences looked to Carla Conti down the inside. Cork are a bit handier, whereas Sandown, she looked like she was climbing over the fences for Jack Kennedy. Kitzbühel started going to his right at the pond fence, jumped in behind 6 Mile Bridge, and what should have been the second last, jumped over behind him again, and then just steps into the ditch beside the last fence, fired Paul into the ground and gave him a good kick for good measure. 6 Mile Bridge continued to jump well, burning into the fence down the hill, good through the railway fences with Miami Magic trying to keep up with him. Carla Conti was still climbing over them, and he just poured it on. And I watched it live. I was thinking, I don't think he's an Arkle horse. Do I think he's a Brown advisory horse? I'm not so sure. Watching a replay, I still don't think he's an Arkle horse. I think he's more a Brown advisory horse. The more I watch the race, I think he really powered up the hill. He stays. He's a good athletic jumper. Nice horse to have and a lovely horse to own. But I think he's one that will benefit going out in trip rather than down.
I think he's an in-betweener. I think Killen Woods was talking Arkle only if it was really, really deep ground. But anyway, we'll see what they do with him. Reflections on Kit's Bull. I suggested to you that he might need to go right-handed. I know this was right-handed, but that if you're thinking that he might bounce back somewhere like Cheltenham, that might not be the case. What's your view, having looked back on it?
No, and I suppose the only time we saw him going left-handed was at Aintree, where he did jump a bit to his right, down the back straight. I thought it was worse than it was when I look back at Punchestown and Chase and debut. Yeah, he definitely goes to his right, and because it's a right-handed track and he's on the inside, it's only marginal. But even at Kempton, at the second last fence, when you had to get in deep, he definitely shows a tendency to do everything to his right. So Cheltenham going left-handed, that wouldn't be ideal, but I still think it's marginal. It's not a massive gallop across the fence or anything.
Right, let's move on to the Irish Arkle. Only 3 runners, but it was absolutely compelling viewing as the advantage swung from Cargisi to Romeo Coolio, back again, and almost back again. Talk us through this exciting race.
It was for a small field, and it booked, and they went from the word go. Cargisi was slicker all the way than Romeo Coolio through the air. But Paul and Jack, they kept each other honest here. Romeo Coolio was good early down Mexico way at a grab at the second. Third fence, they both got in deep and were quite quick at it into the back straight. She was just out jumping him and she was making him follow her. He makes a mistake in the back straight. He matched her at that one, but the next one, he gets in. He's on the hind foot and Jack is always chasing him. Cargisi reaches for that fence when Romeo Coolio missed it. And then at the fourth last fence, Cargisi, again, she's just that bit quicker than him. Same with the third last fence. When he's coming to her, they're both long, but when she lands with more speed. Second last, she gets away from him. Now off the bend, Paul comes to the stand side, and that almost gave Jack a sniff. And Romeo Coolio got running to the last fence. Now she gets empty going to the last, doesn't jump it spectacularly, and when she lands slowly on it about the second stride, it looks like she stands on herself and almost slows herself down even more, and that lets Romeo Coolio by her. Now, does he empty then, or just get bone idle then? I think Jack thinks he's come there to win really well, but luckily for Jack, as the crowd start to get a bit animated, Jack rolls to the outside and makes sure Paul has to switch, which he's entitled to do, to come the other side of him, and Romeo Coolio just holds Cargisi off. I thought it was a great race to watch. Again, do I think Romeo Coolio is an out-and-out Arkle horse? No, I don't. But I think he's a horse that's going to win a lot of races.
And wasn't there a bit of, I think you jockeys would call it race riding between the third last and the second last, where Paul was making sure that Romeo Coolio wasn't able to use his full stride, on Cargisi. It was kind of like, proper jockeyship.
I think I thought he just turned the bend.
Absolutely. I enjoyed every bit of it. It was so compelling, and I think I hope they both go to the Arkle. I don't like the going from 2 mile to 3 mile. Romeo Coolio for the brand advisory. Gordon Elliott's saying that it is going to be ground dependent, that sends him one way or another. Clearly it is Cheltenham, so if it's quick ground, he might go to the brand advisory. He did describe that step up from 2 miles to 3 miles as not ideal, which it wouldn't be.
No, it wouldn't, and it's just the tempo of the race. So when he gets to the Brown advisory, you could see him being too keen.
Yes.
From racing at that distance, whereas if he goes Arkle or maybe Willow Orm at Ferryhouse or 2.5 at Aintree or whatever it is, it'll be a gradual step up in trip. When you could see him next year, maybe starting in Down Royal, going John Durkin, ending up in the Savills, building his way up to it. So King George even, yeah, possibly that's where he'd go. But you could see him building up in trip rather than going in one huge jump now as a novice. Whereas
Cargisi's going to love the Arkle, isn't she?
You would have thought so. And I think the forgotten one would be Eddie Harty's horse, Irish Panther. He got as close to Romeo Coolio as Cargis did, and coming down and trip a fraction will suit him too.
And Kopek de Board, which is it's going to be a tough race to have as only your second start over fences, and Lulamba as well, who we're going to see at the weekend. an outsider, if he does go, would be Jax Jr. Now, he's bounced back. He bled in the Noel at Ascot. He's had his second wind surgery, but he managed to bounce back in handicap company. Lucy Wadham mentioned that the owners are quite keen to go in the Arkle if they can. I mean, he's a nice horse, but this is a different level, isn't it?
It will be a step up. He was good at Sandown. He stayed really well. He jumped solidly. And look, I suppose if you're looking at the last couple of Arkles, I didn't see John go by winning, did you?
Yeah, no, I did not. No, I did not. No, you know, you cannot win it if you're not in it. There's the Kingmaker coming up at Warwick this weekend, obviously, but let's take a look now at the betting for a couple of the handicaps, because we didn't touch upon that in Monday night show. There is how Paddy Power see it for the Jack Richards, which is the Open Novices handicap, and Regent Stroll at the 4 or towards the 4 there, and a number of others that you will know. One horse that might be going up in trip, though, that was a winner at the DRF, was Back Me or Sack Me. What did you think of his win in the O'Driscoll's Irish Whiskey Leopardstown Handicap Chase?
Yeah, Leopardstown Chase found himself well back and kind of off the bridle at about the second fence. Now, he touched a huge price in running, Lydia, and that probably came at the start of the back straight. Sean Bowen down the inside, and he lands here, he has to roust him along. But I think if you did lay him at those huge prices, you were starting to panic when he got to the 6th last fence and he's coming back on the bridle. You were definitely sweating when he got across to the 2nd last fence that he was so close and sure to come home. And by the time he got to the last, well, I'm sure whoever laid him was at least traded out at that stage. But I thought it was a good performance from him, an extra mile. It's a long way, but it does look like it might suit him. But there was a couple in here to take out as well. Waterford Whispers in the green cap with the white star, Kim Rock in the red cap, and Where's My Jet in the middle. At different trips on different ground at Cheltenham, the 3 of those won't be too far away wherever they go.
So I think he hit 270, matched for £3 in running. The Irish handicapper has put him up to a mark of 133. In the immediate aftermath, Emma Mullins was saying this win has opened the door to potentially the Kim Muir. He acknowledged that the professional riders wouldn't be keen to hear that. But this is now the new favourite for the National Hunt Chase, Back Me or Sack Me. And Emmett did say he doesn't think you can go far enough with this horse. That's it then for the Novice Chasers. We're going to usher Josh in now. I spoke to him earlier today.
I do think Kopek was good at nabbing. He jumped better than I thought he was going to jump a fence. I thought at times he was clumsy over a hurdle, but fences seem to have kicked his brain into gear to move his feet at the same speed as
he's kind of learned on the job, though, hasn't he, as well?
Yeah.
Like, do you remember that first display of jumping last year was like,
oh, yeah,
you were like, this horse is never going to see a fence, but then eventually kind of...
It looked like he had never seen a hurdle.
Yeah.
Josh, thanks for joining us here on Road to Cheltenham. Now, you have been trying to get some news for us, some exclusives for the show. Where have you started? Who have you gone to?
Yeah, I spoke to Fergal O'Brien about 6 Mile Bridge. I was really impressed with him at Sandown. And what's interesting about him is all 3 options seemingly at this stage are open. So I put it to him. I asked him what he was thinking at the time. He acknowledged that the Arkle probably is in the picture if it was soft or heavy ground, and he conceded that with the weather that we've had, it could be that ground come Cheltenham. He then also said that if it was quicker ground, the 3 Mile race at the Cheltenham Festival would come into it. And then I asked him, you know, what is your hunch? What would you think you'd like to do? And he said, to put it, to make this very interesting, he said that the Jack Richards, the 2.5 Mile Novices Chase, considering he was only put up £1 to 150, is his idea of where he would go at the moment. No decisions made, but he's leaning towards the way of the Jack Richards Novices Handicap Chase. And I think he's excited about the prospect of a graded horse in a handicap.
Yeah, I can really see that. I think that might be the sweet spot for the horse. What else do you know?
Interesting. I wanted to tap into the novice hurdles. I wanted to follow up with Gordon Elliott because he hinted that Ballyfad could go up in trip, and I wondered what that meant for Skylight Hustle, who won the 2 Mile Grade 1 novices hurdle at the Christmas at Leopardstown. Obviously, he was fortuitous that the talk came down at the last. And the fact that we've not seen him, I know that he was talking about going up in trip with Nathaniel Lacy, but with Ballyfad seemingly possible to go there, where would that leave him? And he did say that the next time we're going to see him, all being well, is in the Turners, the 2 Mile 5 race at the Cheltenham Festival.
Okay, and so that's a definite for Scarlett Hustle, and Ballyfad, is he still not completely committed there?
Yeah, not exactly committed. I'd say Al Kairos definitely going to the Supreme, Scarlett Hustle definitely going to the Turners, and I would say they're leaning probably the way of the 2 mile 5 race when it comes to Ballyfad, but nothing is certain yet.
I must say, with his just going out to his right, I feel like that might be the better fit for him than something that is more going to test him a little bit more, like the Supreme. Anything else? Any other business news wise?
Yeah, they're running out of time at David Pipes to get wind beneath my wings into the Supreme. I spoke to him yesterday. He's still in the betting. Paddy Power have him 20-1 for the Supreme, and in what looks an open race, and with how impressive he was in his bumper, I suspect it's worth mentioning that David Pipe has now conceded it's going to be extremely unlikely that they're getting to Cheltenham. He mentioned the rule change last year. You could go straight into one of those novice races. Poneros did it in the Triumph Hurdle. They've changed that rule, so you'd have to get in a run in before, which I think they're struggling with. I then mentioned, is it going to be the case of one run and then go to Aintree? And he said he really doesn't know. I suspect it's interesting because at this time of the season, do you keep him? Do you pull stumps and keep him as a novice for next year? It is interesting, but I think it's going to be extremely unlikely from what he said that he'll make the Supreme.
Anything is time's ticking on with him, isn't it? So you wonder whether they, if he is right, just get going. Okay, and what's everybody? I mean, what's the chat out there? What have you been dipping into in that regard?
Yeah, there were loads of rumours, Lydia, on X yesterday that we were going to miss a couple of handicappers at the Cheltenham Festival. Live Conti has been ruled out of this campaign anyway by Dan Skelton this morning, so he won't be running in the county. And then Long Draw as well has been ruled out of the Potempt. He's out for the season. But interesting, plenty of people haven't missed Salma De Veri, who was obviously a close second behind Narciso Has in the 2 mile Grade 1 juvenile hurdle. And the talk is, with Salma De Veri 7-1 and Narciso Has 6-4, that gap is simply too big. And I probably somewhat agree.
Okay, right. Well, Ruby and I we'll talk about that too. But this is the time of year when things are coming to the crunch, aren't they? And we're finding out whether horses that we think might get to the festival turns out will or won't. So make sure you keep on top of the news for us, Josh. But that's brilliant. Thanks for your news roundup. So, Ruby, we've just heard via Josh that there's quite a lot of thinking out there that Salma De Veri, the gap between her price and Narciso Has for the Triumph Hurdle is a bit too big. I know you were impressed with both of them when they ran at the DRF. Let's go through the race and then we can talk about their relative merits.
Yeah, look, they were ridden quite differently. Narciso Has poked out to make it. Salma De Veri with a hood on her dropped in at the back because she was quite keen. Monge 2 sat second. Away from the stands, Monge 2 came alive under Jack Kennedy and was quite lucky at the third hurdle actually, because she runs up behind Narciso Has and almost lands on his hind end. Now she almost seems to stall herself rather than jump into the back of him as they landed at the third hurdle. Salma De Veri had settled well at the back. But I just love Narciso Has. I think he's going along in front. He's 2 ears pricked. He jumps from hurdle to hurdle, and there always looks like there's so much under the bonnet for him. Salma De Veri pinged the second last to put herself into the contest, but when he went off the bend, he just left the 2 fillies behind him. And Mark kept the revs up on him all the way to the last hurdle, and he jumped it really well. Paul was trying to deliver Salma De Veri with one challenge, and while people will say, right, it's her first run for Willie, it's his third start. She ran in France in November, so ultimately she's a kind of a tricky one to train in that she wasn't with you all season. You don't know, is she going to keep taking the train and how hard you can push her, whereas Narciso Has has been there all the time. So I can see the point that she will improve and she will be better for it, but I think he improves too, and he keeps getting better, and I think she'll be a much better filly next year. Whatever she does this year is only going to be a bonus for her.
Yeah, it was interesting you not ruling out her potentially growing into being a champion hurdle type, being more suited. I get that, being quite racy by the old course rather than the test of the new course. I also thought she was green. Paul brought her wide, didn't he, to the final hurdle?
Yeah, I did. I'd say Paul knows Narciso Has and he wasn't going to get anywhere close to him to encourage him forward. So I'd say he was trying to get as wide of him as he could to try and mug him. But I just think he's made for that new course. Off the bend, you start kicking, dragging horses. Look, something might be going better than him crossing the road, but I think ultimately he'll outstay the rest of them.
Yeah, I had to be convinced that improvement was actual improvement. I no longer need to be convinced. I think he's a complete package as well. And the way everybody spoke about him afterwards, it's clear that that's what he's always been from your perspective as well. Let's move on to the novice hurdlers and the Tassels Island Novice Hurdle, which was won by Talk the Talk.
Yeah, steadily run affair. Ballyfad jumped out to make the run, and Blake down his inside. Love Me Tender, King Rascal Gray even was up there. A couple of them were a little bit keen, including Devon on Font. Talk the Talk was well back in the race. Now, they weren't going that quick, and I think he does really well to win from where he is. And even if you look at the sectional times, what he does in the last 3 sections is really good. Now, the Reverend bumps off Talk the Talk here as they turned into the home straight. It looks like his shoulder makes contact with the hind end, and then he stumbles and gets rid of Harry Cobden. I don't think he clips heel. I think once he made the contact and bounces out, he just stumbles and sends Harry out over his ears. But I did think Talk the Talk does really well to keep quickening and get there, because the two in front do quicken smartly off the bend. They lengthen to the last hurdle, and it looks like Ballyfad is going to hold off King Rascal Gray, but Talk the Talk is just coming at them. And it actually, when you look at these last 3 sections, it is quite interesting. Now, both King Rascal Gray and Ballyfad were quicker in the second last furlong than they were in the last furlong. They sprinted, reached a level, and then ultimately faded a little bit on the run to the line, and that allows Talk the Talk to get to them. Now, he jumped better than he has done on his previous 3 starts. There was no mistake in Leopardstown, but they were going slow, and he was only needed at 2 jumps, the second last and the last, and he got there on the line.
Yeah, and I was impressed by the fact he was able to make up that ground in order to win. Looking back, it impressed me that he wasn't all out to get there either. But you expressed the concern, and I do see it, that back in a quicker run race on a sounder surface, would his jumping come back under question? What's your view, having had a look back?
Look, there's no doubt that he's jumping even is improving and has been improving. Look, you can excuse any horse his first start in Limerick. He jams on at the second hurdle and lands on all 4s. He went to Fairyhouse on his next start, then went to the first and does the similar sort of thing behind Marcia, jams on and doesn't land galloping. And then in Leopardstown at Christmas, he made a mistake down the back with Sam. Again, lands hind end first. Now, the last hurdle was completely different to that. He goes and jumps that, gets too high, and momentum takes him over. But I just think with his turn of foot, he's a relaxed type. Looking at him going a mile an hour slower in a Turner's, jumping won't be as big a thing, and he has the gears to go a minute. That's only my way of looking at it, but I can see why Connections might be looking at the Supreme.
Yeah, I think they're going to want to settle him, aren't they? And I think they might be more able to settle him in a Supreme than they might in a Turner's. And how about the Ballyfad and King Rascal Gray? Where would you go with them? I'd definitely go Turner's with Ballyfad and probably with King Rascal Gray. You?
Yeah, possibly. I just wonder would a really strong race suit Ballyfad for the Supreme.
Jumping right though. What do you think about that?
Yeah, a little bit of a negative for him. He's been jumping right, making the running. You'd imagine in the Supreme something dragging you. He mightn't be in front till he gets to the second last, and he'd be going wide to the last, but he's in front anyway then.
Up in Scotland in Majborough the weekend, Mossy Fen Road for Harry Derham got turned over at 1-3 by Alistair Ralphs only for Frankie, but Harry's still talking about heading to Cheltenham. And one thing, sorry, just to come back to the Reverend, I noticed that the stewards reminded Harry Cobden to ride with more awareness in future. They were of the view that it was a clipped heels, and so you've gone into it and seen it differently.
I think he does bump, but I don't think he clipped a heel. I think he bumped and then stumbled. But then again, if you're bumping, it's like driving a car. If you drive into the back of the car in front of you, you're wrong.
Okay, let's switch on to the mares, shall we? Because at Fairyhouse earlier this week on Tuesday, so it was Tuesday, we had the rescheduled Solarina and Old School Outlaw, who's been bought by J.P. McManus. I was really impressed by this. How about you?
I was, but I was impressed with her in Naas, and I can see why she was purchased after her run at Naas. Jumped up beside Plastel and Ashen at the second hurdle, was galloping over her when they got to the third last, quickened up really well to the second last hurdle. Actually, it was just after the second last hurdle Mark asked her to go. Loved the way she went to the line, and was good form, and I think she's improved from Naas. But I thought when I look back at the Naas race, she didn't fluke a victory against Bambino Fever. She beat her, and she's a very good mare.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Placide Nation, I was thinking, is she going to be like Let's Dance second season hurdler? She was just swept aside by old school Outlaw. That's an impressive performance. Let's move on and go up in trip for the Nathaniel Lacy and Partners Solicitors Novices Hurdle, which was won by Dr. Steenberg. And this is a horse I have not got right, Ruby. And I was saying on Monday night show, he was, I mean, as far as I can see, he was just the winner everywhere, despite pulling like stink.
Yeah, he was, and he was a horse I had wrong as well, Lydia. I didn't think he was as good as he was. He's a strong jumper. Yes, Hill down the inside took him on, and as Paul tried to get him settled, I thought Danny Gilligan was very good in the Jigginstown colours, because every time Paul got his hands down, Danny just moved up onto his boot into the horse's eye line and make sure Paul wasn't going to get Dr. Steinberg settled or relaxed. Jumped his way to the front of the 7th hurdle. Now, when Yes Hill finally kind of had enough after the jump to third last, as he falls back, he takes Santos Saucefier out of the race a little bit, but Dr. Steinberg wasn't always in control. Kazansky moved up, Love Me Tender, Risk Away on the outside. I thought just here for a second, was Dr. Steinberg starting to empty, but he wasn't. And another good jump at the last saw him power to the 9. You'd imagine on a little bit better surface, going a mile an hour quicker, like they will in the Albert Bartlett than they did on the testing ground in Leopardstown. He should relax a bit better, and I can see why he's favoured, Lydia.
Yeah. And just to wrap up some other novices and what's been going on. So Absolute Doyen won for Paul Nichols with Freddie Gingell on board at Musselburgh, a novices handicap hurdle. He'd previously won a per temps qualifier. The cutoff point for last year was 124. He's been reassessed to 135, so he should comfortably get in, and he is qualified. But we have to be careful, don't we, Ruby? Because there's a number of horses that are quite prominent in the betting for some of the key handicaps at Cheltenham that would need to run at least once more again in order to be qualified.
There are a few, and horses that have been mentioned. Shuttle Diplomacy, for instance, would have to run again. I see that Devon Enfant is short enough in the betting for some of the handicaps, and he requires another run as well. So there are novices in the betting for handicaps that aren't qualified yet.
No, the sneaky one is the one that I thought wasn't qualified, and I'm glad I checked because he is qualified, is the Passing Wife.
Yes, his first start was over hurdles, wasn't it, before he went back to bumpers?
Yeah, and you were saying that that's a Gavin Cromwell move.
It is something he's done in the past. He even got Darver Star into a maiden hurdle for horses who managed to finish out of the first three times.
Canny, very canny. I mentioned the cutoff point for the per temps. I should just trail that for our February the 26th show, I think it's February the 26th, Matt Toombs will be joining us as is traditional, and we'll be looking at all of the handicap entries and all of the angles that is relevant for those. And Matt's very good at that. I know it's a very popular show, so we look forward to welcoming onto the show. Right, our last section will be wrapping up with the Irish Champion Hurdle. So, Ruby, this was one of the races in the DRF where my on-the-spot view hasn't really changed much. How about you on the Irish Champion Hurdle?
I don't think we have too much more to add on it, Lydia. Jack Kennedy's body language compared to Paul Townend's were always chalk and cheese. Lossy reached at the 3rd hurdle and Paul was riding her along, whereas Jack was always slowing down. El Fabiolo went a decent gallop. Anzanam settled and got close enough that he was going to be good enough. But look, Lossy she was looking a bit to her left. She never travelled with the same gusto that Brighter Days Ahead did, and I think Paul only got onto Jack's tail off the home turn because he was waiting for Paul, and then when he asked Brighter Days Ahead to go, she lengthened the way down the straight and ultimately beat him impressively. Danny, a bit like Sean Bowen on Firefox, and Jack Kennedy maybe on Western Fold, has achieved a better possible position than he might have been entitled to. He took out of the race down the back and has run on then past the tiring Anzadam and El Fabiolo, but there was one winner here from a long way out, and she was much the superior mare on the day.
Yeah, Jane said on Monday night that the more robust masculine mare has beat the sort of flat-bred, racier type, and maybe the ground has swung it more in Brighter Days Ahead's favour than other way around. I think she's bang in there with now given a solid excuse. The first time I've heard something tangible from Gordon Elliott to say that she could win the Champion Hurdle. Are you still of the view that you don't expect her to?
I think she wants to cut in the ground. If it's soft ground, she has a chance, but if it was getting closer to good to soft good, no, I wouldn't.
Okay, we're not going to repeat the lossy mouth debate because there's lots of time to yak about that. county hurdle for Amsterdam?
Possibly off top weight, but he was near enough top weight. Maybe he's a bit short of champion. He's short of champion hurdle class anyway.
Yeah, dropped a pound to 156 after that. No county for Poneros because he's only had 3 runs over hurdles and you need 5. So beware of that 16 to 1 that's floating about. And El Fabiolo is probably heading towards the Aintree hurdle after taking them along in the Irish champion hurdle. Right, that's it then, Ruby. Thank you very much for going through in such close detail all of those races at the DRF, and good discussion. I've enjoyed that.
So did I.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope you've all enjoyed watching Road to Cheltenham. As ever, you can catch up with the column online, but otherwise this show will be back next week at the usual time. Bye-bye.
Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.